move back to the division and how China's influencing our division. Do you think they're behind some of this woke culture stuff?
It's a good question.
Because that's a very divisive topic.
It really is. It's woke America is it's I mean, frankly, it feels like a waste of resources. It all started with ESG. When ESG first happened, I loved ESG. I still love ESG. ESG is exactly the kind of discovery that makes America great. We found a way to create something that requires no resources, but increases the value so that it increases the economic displacement, right? It costs more money because it brings more value. That's what ESG was, what ESG is. It's what I love about ESG. We're going to reduce our carbon footprint. We're going to plant more trees. We're going to bring more women into executive positions. We're going to, appreciate diversity in culture and race. That's awesome. There are people who are getting paid more money. There is more economic stimulus. There are companies whose stock price is increasing only because they're practicing ESG. That's excellent. That brings more economic power to the United States. Well, then that kind of some bastardized niche of that turns into this idea of woke culture that somehow, everything from the fact that white people are so racist they don't even know they're racist, to this idea that we have to respect the gender identity of the individual and their pronouns and all this other stuff. That's the opposite of ESG. That's a bunch of work that doesn't add value to anything. Mm-hmm. When something is a lot of work and it doesn't add value, it's a drain on resources. So here ESG is this boost economically, and then in comes woke culture, which is this drag economically. Do I think that the Chinese are behind it? I don't think that some freaking Chinese covert influence expert invented the idea of woke. Mm-hmm. Instead, again, following the laws of covert influence, you just find a divisive topic and then you pour fuel onto that divisive topic. So I do think that it's very likely once woke culture was born, then the Chinese started creating their own pots of money to fuel the fight.
So how exactly do you think they're doing that? I mean, I know we know about the bots. We know that there are, what do they call them, bot farms or something, where there's just thousands and thousands of people
social media
media.
So social media ads is an easy way to fervent more of that culture. TikTok, as popular as TikTok is, who controls TikTok's algorithm?
China.
Who controls TikTok's algorithm in the United States?
China.
They can actually create different algorithms for different geographical regions, right? So now, if you know that woke culture is active among a certain demographic, and you know that TikTok is the most popular tool in that demographic, you can just shape that TikTok. You can even create algorithms that target specific age groups inside of the algorithm. So mom and dad don't even see that their 18 and 19 and 17-year-old child is getting this kind of content delivered to them, right? So there's lots of ways that a sophisticated technological country can seed and cultivate conflict, like disagreements over culture or woke culture or any other topic that you can imagine, whether President Biden is pro-Chinese or whether his son's laptop was this or whether Trump was put in power by the Russians. You can basically control any information you want to if you control the algorithm that sits on the platform.
What are some other ways they could do it other than social media?
So there's mainstream media. Most of what we find on Google search, most of what you find even in like a newspaper or a magazine is content that is sponsored in some way, right? Somebody wants an article written, somebody lobbies to have an article written, whatever it might be. And that may not be true for your mainstream media like your Washington Post and your Economist and your CNN. They just want clicks. They'll create their own garbage. They just want clicks, right? But when you're talking about magazines that you find on bookshelves, magazines that you find in airplanes, magazines that you find, on coffee tables at wherever around the world, a lot of that content is sponsored. Somebody wants you to write about something, so they pay the magazine to write about something. And through a cutout of a cutout, I mean, the Chinese can just funnel money into certain content that they want to have created. Not just the Chinese. The Russians can do it. The Iranians can do it. The North Koreans can do it. The Colombians can do it if they choose, right? We do it just as well, right? We can direct and drive content creation in all sorts of mediums all across the world. When you talk about things like YouTube, when you talk about things like Instagram, when you talk about any popular tool out there is a potential avenue for a paid sponsor or a paid ad or content that is intentionally created and then optimized to reach a certain audience. It's a difficult, challenging world that we live in because content can be crafted and tailored and targeted so well. It's also an area where we tap into some of the best freedom and the best information that we can get because conversations like this are very real. The only reason this real conversation can happen is because of the same tools that other people use to pervert true information.
Out of all the stuff that we've talked about so far, I mean, what do you think is the most concerning? Or do you have anything to add? Do you have any other?
The most concerning thing to me is definitely the fact that China has gotten to a place, specifically with China. The most significant thing about China is that it's gotten to a place where it has the potential to direct next steps in Europe. Hypersonic missiles, Huawei, rare earth minerals, Belt Road Initiative, they're involved in all sorts of stuff. That one thing, to me, is the most imminent, pressing concern. Because if they figure out how to do that, there's no way we're touching Taiwan or keeping Taiwan safe. If they figure out how to negotiate peace between Ukraine and Russia, for sure they're going to win Taiwan. And we're all going to be sitting around wondering how it happened.
Am I missing anything? Are there any angles out of the 10 topics that we've brought up?
I mean, that's just like you said. I mean, China in and of itself is this massive conversation. So, I mean, what we've covered today is the highlights, the most critical pieces that people need to be paying attention to. And frankly, what you brought up about China, I mean, there's only a small population paying attention to this stuff.
I know.
Most people are letting themselves get distracted by what their coworkers are talking about, by what's playing on primetime television, by what the mainstream media is telling them. They're not paying attention to this yet. And they should be, but they won't be. But I'm glad that the people listening to you are.
Yeah, well, it's, I mean, this stuff scares the shit out of me. All of it, especially the supply chain with the green energy. That if we're headed down that road, and we're gonna call this, it's anything but energy independence. I mean, not to mention all the spyware they're gonna put in all this stuff. So
we don't have a great track record of energy independence. Remember when we got all upset about OPEC in the 80s? And yet, here we are, still dealing with Saudi Arabia and UAE and Oman and Bahrain to get all of our oil.
Yeah.
We don't.
Do you feel like we're taking any measures to counter any of this stuff? Because I don't. Our border isn't locked down. Fentanyl is just coming in. I don't see a whole... Everything I buy still says made in China on it, So I mean, unfortunately, I try to wise up to it, but I mean, you can't. You can't. Everything is made there.
I bought my daughter a little stuffed puppy the other day. I tried so hard to get a made in America puppy. I mean, just to give you a little extra backstory, right? My gift to my wife and I for our anniversary this year, which will be 13 years in a month and 5 days, right? Or 2 months and 5 days. or my gift to us is going to be a poodle puppy. We're going to get our first family dog. I already know I want it to be a poodle. I have all my vision for what this poodle is going to be. So I bought my daughter a stuffed poodle puppy so that she could practice taking care of a dog, right? And I went out of my way to find a puppy that was made in the United States, and I found one. It said, designed in Georgia. And I forget the name of the city in Georgia, but I've driven through there right outside of Atlanta. And I was like, hell yes. It's a nice, high quality, stuffed poodle puppy. It's exactly what I want. I order it, I buy it, it comes in, I pull it out, I look at the tag, proudly designed in the United States. I flip the tag over, made in China.
Everybody's doing it. Even I don't do much merch, but even in the merch world, you support somebody, and I don't blame them. You know what I mean? I mean, you can't blame them. There's only so many options, and unfortunately, 99 out of 100 are made in China. And if you want something made here in the U.S., be prepared to pay double, maybe triple, right?
Yeah.
But now the big thing is printed in the USA, made in China. Printed in the USA. But
there are policies in place. I have to give credit where credit is due, right? Donald Trump put in motion a policy that was very anti-China, right? He put in a program that was called something like the Countering Chinese Influence something, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was a very controversial program because the liberal voters and liberal media saw it as being racist, right? Targeting Chinese people. You can't say that. It's a very racist and an anti-Chinese program. So when Trump left office, one of the first things that Biden did was cancel that program. And the news media talked about him canceling that program. What nobody talked about was that he took the same concepts of that program and moved it into a newly named program called something like the American Independence from East Asia Act or something like that, right? Same program, same everything, moved into a different name. So at the White House, at the administrative level, they understand that the fight against China is very real. That is, during Biden's most recent State of the Union, he talked about a number of initiatives to bring more domestic manufacturing of high-tech projects, medical devices, weapons development, electric vehicles, bringing it back to the United States. The problem is they have to spend a year drafting it, spend a year voting it in, and then they can't actually start to apply it until 3 to 5 years out.
Yeah.
So he announced it in 2023 during a State of the Union address to take effect in 2027, 2028.
Well, it would have been nice if they would have just, taken the agenda and ran with it rather than deconstruct the entire thing just to try to construct it again.
Right.
And
the bigger question becomes, if we know that those policies are taking place in 4 years, what are we going to do right now, right? I mean, you and I are very tactical. What are we going to do now? I appreciate the strategy, but what are we going to do right now?
You can't do anything because you're going to offend somebody.
That's the concern, right? That's the thing that's the game that's being played at a geopolitical level, right? What are we going to do in Ukraine to counter Russia? What are we going to do in Europe to counter Chinese influence and Chinese involvement supporting Russia and Ukraine? What are we going to do to woo India back to our side of the fence so they stop supporting and partnering with China and Russia, right? What are we going to do and how are we going to do it? And as long as we have political infighting about woke culture, we're just distracting ourselves from the larger question, the threat that looms over the heads of our children and our children's children.
Hey everybody, I'm Shawn Ryan. Click here to subscribe to the Shawn Ryan Show YouTube channel for the hottest and most compelling interviews that you will not see anywhere else. I've also made a playlist of all the previous SRS episodes so they're easy to find. You can find that right here.